Is there a sports podcast in Detroit that people are talking about?
Hey, everybody, this is Freddie Cohen of ESPN Radio. When I'm not talking about breaking news or breaking news on ESPN Radio, I'm always a fan and listen to the Detroit Sports Podcast, and so should you.
This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Yes, sir. Episode 202 in the books. We're recording it right now. This is the DocNJock podcast. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Joining me, my cousin, Adam, the Jock Strozinski. What's up, cuz? Welcome to this week's podcast.
Dude, that song makes me want to get on here and just pretend like I'm DMX and just go, ah! Just a big old scream, just a giant release. But good things, man. We got good things going on with the podcast. I am proud to announce that this Friday we'll be having a brand new podcast debut. Basically, it is everything to get your weekend started. That's really kind of the mindset with this one. It's going to touch on a little bit of sports, but mostly it is what happens when you go to the bar and it's now midnight and you know you shouldn't have one more, but you're going to have one more. It's the conversations that basically come out of that type of state of mind. So it's going to be a little bit all over the place. It's going to touch on things that are going on in and around the city. It's going to touch on pop culture, what's hot in music, what's hot in electronics, what's hot in basically the internet world. It's just going to kind of cover everything.
So you'll be one of the hosts of the show?
Yes, I will. It'll be me and it'll be...
No!
That's right, Dan. It'll be me and it'll be my buddy Jay. Right now, after having a conversation with you, the name's kind of in flux. We'll get that figured out here before the release date here tomorrow. But it'll either be drunken ramblings of two madmen or, like you said, two madmen that might be a little bit more sophisticated. So it's going to be a good time. So check it out. Every Friday it's going to drop. Should be a really good show. My buddy Jay's a giant open book. Everything and anything. I mean, the guy's just got personality for days and talks about everything. So it'll be a good time.
No, I like the fact that you took initiative to start a program to do something because podcasting is fun. It really is something that you can do, and if you put your mind to it, you can really just build up a following, do a show, and you can do a lot of different things with it. Definitely talk about sports, talk about issues going on around town, and make it fun and entertaining with your boy. And that's really what it is that, you know, you're going to talk to your boy anyway. Why not record it and let people kind of have a little bit of insight into what you guys talk about? And you guys are, like I said, guys that get out there, have a good time, and some of these things need to be shared because, you know, I'm a proud papa now, so I'm not spending as much time in the bars as I would like to be, but it'll be nice, and I'll definitely be tuning in Friday, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. It's always awesome to release new projects, and you said it. This week has been amazing, shaping up to be one of the best weeks ever with all the guests that we've had here. And it's starting to now become clear to me that, hey, now we can also become a place where we can ally with others that are releasing new projects, that are doing things to actually promote their stuff. I mean, if you would have told me 3 years ago that a UFC fighter would come to our office to promote his next fight, or a respected NHL journalist, you know, that's starting a new venture, taking a huge risk like we did, and he comes in here the day of the release of his project to share stories about, you know, launching a new venture and having a little bit of a debate about, you know, free information versus pay subscription sites. It's been a fun-ass week, and now we're also happy to announce that after 4 years of tweeting like crazy, we finally, you know, one of the goals that I had was to get the Twitter page powered by an entity. And, you know, Score is launching a mobile app in a couple months, and they've said, look, we love your brand, we love your market, we think we want to power your Twitter page. And I'm like, cha-ching. Now the next goal is to get someone to work with us to sponsor the studio. So each goal that we're setting, it is being met. It's really fun to do this when you reach out to people and they're receptive. Within the same day, I messaged Craig and he was like, yes, I've been so busy, but I can come in the evening. Boom, we get it done. And the flexibility that we can have with podcasting is that we're not set to like, look, hey, we have to record at 7 and boom, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't come through. Where, you know, you're doing a podcast now, you can do it and release it on Friday. And the consistency with which we do this makes it really fun. And it's a good time, bro. It's really fun. And I think hard work pays off. And when you actually do something you love, it really doesn't even seem like work.
Absolutely, man. This has been one of those things. We've been doing it. I mean, we took this from doing it in a basement where we had kids running around trying to kill each other to now we actually have our own studio. We've got our Twitter page powered by an actual entity, like you said. And I mean, shit, man, you've basically invested all of your money into fidget spinners. Everywhere I look around, there's damn fidget spinners all over this office. What's going on here? What do you got in your hand?
Once I saw that the Tigers would put the logo on it, you had to have one, so I got one. And I'm a psychologist, so it works with sometimes some unruly kids to have some.
It's like 78 fidget spinners sitting around this joint.
Come on, man.
It's like I got to move a box of them just to get to my chair. What's going on here?
It also helps in meetings when guys come in here. They're a little bit nervous, maybe to talk to the DOC. They look at it and go, "Oh, okay." It's also a way for me.
Super intimidating, aren't
yeah,
you?
Exactly. Man. So to give a quick update, the garage sale went amazing.
Did it?
It was awesome. We hit the goal of 500. We even exceeded the goal.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So there was a couple drawbacks in that we had to take the stuff in and out of the garage for 3 days straight. And then the other drawback was the wife was so tired after Saturday that on Sunday she basically didn't want to attend to the needs of the DOC on Father's Day because she was exhausted. So it made it a little more. I had to do more work than I would have liked.
What kind of needs are these? I don't know if I'm going to know. It's my cousin, so that's kind of weird, but whatever.
All of them. All the needs.
All the needs.
All the needs. So,
you're in the bathroom taking care of yourself, eh?
All the cooking done by the doc. All the stuff, watching the kids. So, in essence, the wife got to enjoy basically a free day. And for me, though, it was cool because the kids were, just to spend 6-7 hours with kids that are just, basically doing top rope moves on each other now. The two girls are like laying on each other. They're fighting and they're trying to compete. And the best thing that I got to see was...
Wait, do you still have the inflatable house?
I still have that.
Do you sit there and let them wrestle inside the inflatable house?
They are going at it.
That's awesome.
And now the 5-year-old realized that she can lie to her sister and piss her off. So the oldest one now is about to turn 5, and she goes to her sister, "I'm sorry, our trip to the pool has been canceled." The 3-year-old's like, "No!" And she's like walking away kind of like proud, like I pissed her off. So that was really cool.
I used to do that to my sister for the longest time. My sister, because we have baby pictures of my sister, and she straight up looks like she was Asian. So like she had the little squinty slanted eyes. She had like a full head of black hair. She was a little bit darker skin toned. So I would sit there and I would tell her that she was shipped over, that she was adopted. I told her that she was shipped over from Japan in a Mitsubishi crate. And she was like, "No, I wasn't. No, I wasn't." The best part was, I mean, this is probably why she's a little bit messed up in the head today, but she would go to my mom and she'd ask my mom. And my mom would be like, "Yeah, you were adopted." And just sit there and just F with her so brutally. And she'd just start crying and lose her shit. And then we'd have to sit there and put her back together like she was Humpty Dumpty, dude. It was amazing.
Well, I think you and I are both crazy in that we still, for the most part, I've stayed up now the last 2 evenings watching 10-10 games with the Detroit Tigers. They put out a stat.
Shit, you're better than me.
Yeah, they said someone put out that the Tigers really all year have only played maybe 14 or 15 games under 3 hours total. You know what I mean? So each game is taking you 3 hours to watch. So I was kind of watching.
It's not like they're any fun.
But for me, the way I look at it is each and every day that the Tigers go out there and play a baseball game is a new opportunity to see how Brad Ausmus, mismanages situations. Just look at what happened on Tuesday. If you just look at, you got Jordan Zimmerman going along, and Brad Ausmus thinks I'm the smartest guy in the room, and I got to go with the lefty-lefty matchup. And what happens? Nah, it didn't work out. So,
another home run.
Another home run. And you realize that when the Tigers go to try and implement any use of that bullpen, it's a disaster. Even Justin Wilson now is starting to look overmatched at times. And most of us, when the game went to the 10th inning, probably realized, oh boy, we're at a disadvantage. You give them credit. They did fight back to tie the game to make it 4-4, but you just don't have enough resources really in the end to really be competitive. So last week, if you listen to the DocNJock podcast, I had said that by episode 205 live, that you would be changing your mind and not going with this attitude of, oh, it's still early, oh, the Central's so bad. In the week you said that, literally, the words left your mouth. This is the AL Central. KC's winning. Cleveland's on a hot run. So literally, the moment you started speaking, the teams in the AL Central started playing well. Have you changed your mind in the last week, realizing, wow, after a couple of nice games versus Tampa Bay, they basically crapped the bed the last week?
I'm a man of my word, and I told you, I said they have to win the next 2 series. And at this point, they sat there, they split with Tampa. They're either going to lose or they're going to split with Seattle here. So based upon what I said, you have to sell. This team should be in full sell mode. I don't know what the hell you're going to get for a guy like a Miguel Cabrera who's all beat up. Not sure what you're going to get for a guy like JD Martinez when everybody knows that he's not coming back to this team next year. So you're going to have to trade him away, or you're going to have to sit there and just let him walk away. So why not try to get something for him? Nobody's going to want a guy like Justin Upton. Justin Verlander's not going anywhere because his contract's so inflated. You don't really have, I mean, Ian Kinsler, what's that guy doing right now? Not a whole lot. I'll answer it for you. So you've got pieces that you need to move. You got guys that you need to get rid of, and you need to be in full rebuild mode. And I just don't know where it's going to come from, what you're going to get for these guys. But yes, a week later, man, my word, I said you had to win these next 2 series. They didn't win them. They're not going to win them. They need to sit there, and they need to be in full sell mode. And that being said, if you're looking to spark some change for this team, I think Brad Ausmus has to go. I think it's done. I've been the biggest proponent for him. I thought going into this year, he sounded like he was much more comfortable. It felt like he had a much better grasp on how to control the room and what to do with this team. And now looking at it, there's no hope. There's nothing. This season is over. It's now June 22nd. This season is absolutely over. It's done. I mean, we've got nothing else to watch until we get some Lions preseason football going on. And that's kind of where we're at with it. Brad Ausmus needs to let go. You need to start your search for the next manager of this team, possibly even the next general manager of this team, because Al Avila has been absolutely atrocious. So I would remove Brad Ausmus. I'd probably go to Omar Vizquel, give him a shot, let him see what he's got, because that, I think, is the most logical, if you're going to keep it in-house, the most logical guy to sit there and turn this team over to. Possibly get something out of, you have a very large Hispanic collection of players, possibly get something out of those guys. If not, he was the guy who was, I don't know, I guess he was being given opportunities, especially in the World's Baseball Classic. He was given a shot there. So it seems like he's one of those guys who might be a hot commodity if he was to be on the free market. So I would give it a shot there and see what happens. But I'd always keep my eyes open. I mean, who the hell knows? Maybe the Chicago Cubs sit there and they get tired of Joe Madden. Maybe that happens. Probably
What's been so weird,
who knows?
What's been so weird with the Detroit Tigers is they're trying their best to stay positive. You know, after Justin Verlander's last start, he comes in and is like, listen, don't focus on the fact that I walked 5 batters. Let's focus on the fact that we came back and won. Miguel Cabrera hit a walk-off home run. We got the victory. So let's try and stay positive. Then you realize, okay, the game after, JV's calling out the fans, hey, stay positive. Let's stop booing Miguel Cabrera. They go out there and they unfortunately don't have Victor Martinez because he's now dealing with an irregular heartbeat. And I got to go to that game on Friday, and for 1 3-hour period, you got to see what a complete performance looked like. And I was lucky that me and my nephew and your Uncle Brian got a chance to go watch a great performance. Offensively, defensively, pitching, it was a masterful performance. And you go, okay, maybe this is what was needed, a little spark without Victor there clogging up the 4th spot. But then you go into the rest of the series, and it was unfortunate. And a lot of things that my little 7-year-old can pick up on. He had a funny little embarrassing moment in that Saupold got into the game on Friday, and he saw the 5. He saw the 5 on the jersey. He didn't get a chance to see. He's like, oh my God, they put in Rodriguez. He sucks. And I'm like, no, wait a minute. That's not, I don't think number 57. I think Saupold is 53 or 55.
And Zoo's how old, like 9?
7.
7, okay.
And
yeah.
he
He's a
knows,
7-year-old. He knows the deal.
He knows the deal. And he's like, I don't want to see Francisco Rodriguez. I'm like, Zoo's, the game is out of hand. It's like 13-2. So it's pretty good. But he didn't want to see him in the game.
Right.
But a little 7-year-old knows not to put in Frankie Rodriguez. But when I started thinking about it, I'm like, why is Brad Ausmus in so much trouble? Why is he feeling the heat? And here's just a simple notion. If you just want to take one small microcosm of why Brad Ausmus is not going to be successful in Detroit, okay? Just look at the situation with K-Rod. Podcasters know it. Little 7-year-old tykes that don't have any pubes know what's going on. Okay? They understand K-Rod sucks. Okay?
I don't know why that makes me laugh, but it does.
Right. He knows. He's 7. He's like, K-Rod, don't put him in the game ever.
How do you know he doesn't have pubes? What are you doing? What kind of uncle are you?
Come on, man. That's not the reference I was going for.
I understand.
Meaning that he's a little tyke.
I understood.
A little tyke knows not to put in K-Rod.
You know how this show goes.
Yeah. A little tyke knows not to put in K-Rod.
That's right. Yep.
So K-Rod muscles up. He hulks up. He goes to one of the writers, Chris McCoskey, and he's like, hey, no one's talking to me. Yeah, that's right. The reporter should have said, "Are you worth talking to, dude? You're old. Sit back. I don't even know why I'm taking the time to take my pen out of my pocket to even write about you. It's written about. Oh, now it's news." So then Brad Ausmus has to address it. So what does Brad Ausmus do? Does he nut up? Does he man up and say, "No, sit your ass down. I'm going to put you in a game where we're up 10 runs and let you, do your business"? No, he placates a guy that everybody knows is done. So what does he do? He puts him in again in a series versus Tampa Bay, in a series versus Seattle, gives up home runs again.
But isn't that just him giving him enough rope to hang himself so he could be like, "See, I told you"?
I really believe he needs him to do some things. And unfortunately...
Well, he does, because there's nothing left in this bullpen. But at the same point, K-Rod comes out and starts running his mouth, talking about how, nobody talks to me. My pitching coach doesn't come and sit with me and hold my hand, and we don't go over videotape. And Brad Ausmus, when was the last time I talked to him? And Brad's like, "Hey, dude, the door works both ways. You can open it and you want to talk about something, let's talk about it." And he basically gives him enough rope to go hang himself and shows that he sucks still.
Brad Ausmus needed to man up and sit K-Rod down and say, "Look, you're not going anywhere above low-leverage situations ever until the rest of the year. I'll wear out Chad Bell. I'll wear out Stumpf. I'll wear out Alex Wilson and make him look like a fool, too."
I would totally have loved that.
Yeah.
Just a gangster-ass manager.
Exactly. But no, what does he do? He's like, no. He comes out and actually said it, and I got creative with the editing. He actually came out and said, "Our best option is... Francisco Rodriguez behind the Wilsons, in the bullpen." He came out and said it. I really slowed it down. And he said, "Our third best option is Francisco Rodriguez." Go check out our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. I got creative. And I was like, when I saw that, I was like, I cannot believe he said that. And so it makes me, when you give a guy 15 chances and he fails 13 out of 15 chances, what does that say about you? The other guys, fine, you're trying to, throw out Bell. He was great. We started praising him. Boom, he gives up back-to-back home runs versus Tampa Bay. That was embarrassing. The Father's Day performance. Logan Morrison really hulked up and was feasting on Tigers pitching. But you go into it and you realize that some of the moves that he's trying to make are just blowing up because of the fact the team doesn't have enough talent. But when you look at it, I don't think Brad Ausmus has enough balls to sit down a K-Rod and tell him, "Look, it's done. Your time here is done. I'm going to use you in this situation. You can tell me that you've had 5,000 saves in your career, but what I see out there is you're serving up a 90-mile-an-hour meatball batting practice home run shot each and every time that you're going to come out there." So that's one of the reasons why Brad Ausmus is not successful, is that I don't think he has the ability to really hammer a point home when needed. K-Rod should not be performing at any level outside of super low leverage situations. And because of the fact he keeps trotting the guy out there, he's hurting the team. Simple fact that you're down by 2 runs. With that offense, hell, if Francisco doesn't go out there and give up a 2-run shot, then you're not down by 4 runs. You can still be down by 2 and have a legitimate shot with Justin Upton and JD Martinez potentially doing some things if they have a great performance, when you're trailing. But when you put K-Rod in there and the lead goes from 2 to 4, you have no chance. That's where the manager becomes an influencing factor, and that's why I feel like the heat is coming on him. And I think, in essence, the locker room is starting to feel it. I feel like the heat's coming down on everybody, and I feel like the pressure of realizing that everything's going to fall apart has really hit this team. And Brad Ausmus is trying his best, but at the very end, it's just not a good enough team to really go do some things. You go out to Seattle and you play like that, it's just not something that you would think that is going to be successful for long term. And I'm wondering why, as we record this podcast, we're not seeing on the wire that Brad Ausmus has been fired. I think that's a spark. That's really the only thing you could do. And I feel like the quickest replacement you would do is not Lloyd McClendon, because he's been through this before and he's not really anything more than above average manager. You give Omar Vizquel a chance. Maybe he has something that will spark this team and get them to the end of the season and make a run. But it's really a last-ditch effort. I think the talent on this team is just not good enough. But it's just a tough situation to watch this team, because in the end, it's like a slow death that we're watching game in and game out.
Look, don't be surprised if Brad Ausmus doesn't get back on that Tigers jet after the San Diego series. He's got a home out in San Diego. I wouldn't be surprised if Al Avila came down and said, "Look, we're going to relieve you of your duties," and he sits there and takes an Uber back to his house in San Diego.
San Diego.
Yeah, when the Tigers come back home and take on Kansas City, I'm expecting that there will be a different manager who will be running this ball club. And you just kind of look at it. There's starting to be some cracks that are showing through. You had your remarks with K-Rod. We've already sat there and we've touched on those and we rehashed those. Miguel Cabrera. Brad Ausmus has come out and said, "Miguel Cabrera is not hurt. Don't worry about it. This, that, and the other thing." Last week, you sit there and Miguel Cabrera comes out and says, "Yeah, I've been dealing with a back injury since the World Baseball Classic. I've got a hip flexor and I've got a bum foot." All right, and then you sit there, you look at what's going on out on the field. You got lackluster play. Miguel Cabrera sits there, shows up as manager because he's pissed off that he's getting the ball thrown to him for pickoff plays repeatedly.
Did you find that to be distasteful, or you feel like maybe if Brad knew that he was hurt, that you don't call all those pickoff plays at first? What do you think about that? That was weird, right?
I think it's a weird situation. I just think it's bad managing, and I think it's a player who's upset and is starting to feel some of the pressure. Look, when Miguel Cabrera hit that home run the other night, that walk-off, he looked pissed off. He looked mad. I think he's starting to hear the boos. And I think he realized that his play isn't up to what Miguel Cabrera's play normally is up to. And so he's starting to feel the heat as well. So you got a manager who you're kind of pissed off at. You're sitting there and you're upset about your own performance because you know it's not where it's supposed to be. So I think it's just been a culmination. And this is the problem. This team is getting it from basically all ends right now. It's just coming from everywhere. You got your star top players not performing. You got a manager who can't get out of his own way. You got an organization that is just lacking depth, any sort of depth. Your minor league system's absolute trash. Your bullpen, you can't sit there and you can't turn a game over to your bullpen because you don't have the arms. I mean, we thought the Wilsons were the answer, but it's like every other game they're okay, and then they're sitting there giving up home runs. So your bullpen's absolute trash. You can't sit there and you can't sub players in and out in the lineup on a daily basis because they're not good enough. I mean, shoot, Mikey Matu can't even sit there and lay down a good bunt. What are we talking about here? It's a bunt. This is something you learn in like 7th grade baseball. You know what I'm saying? It's not a good organization. It's not a good team right now. And everything is just, basically it's like being in an old dilapidated building in downtown Detroit and the ceiling starting to cave in. On top of the ceiling caving in, the floor underneath you is giving out now. So the building's just falling in upon itself. And that's where this Tiger season's at. It's absolutely abysmal right now. It's horrible.
And the unfortunate thing is the only asset in the building is the steel, and all the people are coming in trying to steal it for free. You know what I mean?
Right.
You can't even try to sell the steel for a profit because everybody's already starting to pilfer it, and you can't get value for it because each and every day that goes by, you're starting to realize that, oh boy, Ian Kinsler's now batting probably, his batting average is not where it needs to be. His power is down. Victor Martinez's power is down, and he's out of the lineup now because of his irregular heartbeat. Miguel Cabrera is going to be super tough to try and move because he's paid $30 million now for the next 5 to 7 years. So it's really hard. I know everybody wants to start the full deconstruction, but it doesn't seem completely viable. And that's why it's really tough. And I'm starting to feel like when we look at it, and you can see by the attendance, the attendance now is, I believe, 16th, 17th in the entire Major League Baseball. The fans have started to realize, okay, it's done. We're no longer going to be really competitive. So why invest $150 each trip that you go down to Comerica Park when you can save it, enjoy it at home, yell, curse, have a good time, drink cheaper beer that you can buy from a Kroger or anything like that. So it's really coming to an end. We all realize it. It's just now everybody realizing, okay, how is it going to end abruptly? Or is it going to be dragging, kicking, and screaming where Brad Ausmus gets fired at the end of the year and he rides this out with an under 500 team and everything kind of just falls apart? But it's really tough because you would think a team like Seattle, I know they're playing well at home, you should be able to have a 10-run performance. You should go out there and support a guy like Anibal Sanchez. Well, you got to give him credit. I mean, everybody thought, you thought it, I thought it. Shoot, even probably my little nephew thought that Anibal Sanchez was going to go out there and pitch 3 innings and give up 15 runs. But he did a decent job. It sucked that he did eventually give up a home run, but it was only a 2-run shot. So if you would have told me he goes out there, pitches 5 innings, only gives up 2 runs, I'll take it. And, I didn't bring up the fact that I recall if I rewound the tape here and spun it, somebody here was like, let's go get Buck Farmer. Who said that? Let's go put in Buck Farmer. I think Buck Farmer could be a guy with his great numbers in the minors. Let's throw him out there and see what he can do. Was that you?
Probably was me.
Oh, that was you. That said Buck Farmer.
I was the internal optimist up until this past weekend.
Buck Farmer, dude.
Basically,
come on,
here's
man.
the thing. Reality struck me as I was sitting there listening to the ball game at my father's house on Father's Day. And I just sat there, I turned to him, and he turned to me, and he was like, this team is absolute shit. And I was like, you know what? You're right. They need to be in full sell mode. And he was like, yeah, you big dummy. Like, he just sat there and called me out. Because he says there he listens to the show.
Yeah.
He knows that. He knows where I was at.
Yeah, Buck Farmer.
I'm a total idiot. What do you want from me? I'm just a guy who has takes. I know nothing.
It was funny because, you know what? You said it. You had the hope. He had 2 decent performances. But in
he
essence,
turned into a giant gas can, and he set himself on fire, and he rolled around in it.
see, this is why, unfortunately, Brad Ausmus struggles, is that he's relying upon the 2 good performances out of 15. It's like, Brad, there are 13 performances where he sucks, and he gives up home runs, and Buck Farmer looks like an idiot. His ball's up. He can't keep the ball in the yard. But you remember those 2 performances where he didn't give up 0 runs? Brad, what kind of fucking perspective are you got here? Look at the 13 times where he gave up 6 runs and didn't get you out of the inning. What? Wake up! There were 13 other performances. John, the podcaster, tells you he sucks. Dude, I mean, literally, how do we know Buck Farmer is inefficient and Brad Ausmus is still trying to piece together 2 performances out of his whole career? Come on now, Buck Farmer literally is going to wear out the tires on his car driving up and down I-75, and he needs to stay there. He's just really, in essence, like everybody says, a 4A player. When you bring him up here, he's going to be a disaster. He's not going to just turn it around all of a sudden. You know what I mean? And I just think that, and I think the problem with some of the analysts and some of the, management with the Detroit Tigers is they're really hoping for 2 or 3 good performances out of a long stretch. And when they get it, they think they've done something. When in reality, this is an under 500 club. They're playing a bad brand of baseball, and it's looking more and more like a complete rebuild is on its way. It's coming, but I just don't think it's coming fast enough like the fans and I and everybody else would want. So it's a bad situation. It's going to be probably a rough week, and we'll see if by episode 205 live, Brad Ausmus still has a job.
I'll be honest with you. There should be construction crews hanging out at Tiger Stadium, hanging out at the new Little Caesars Arena, hanging out at Ford Field, and hanging out with the Pistons. Honestly, man, like all these teams, they need to be in rebuild mode. And I know the Lions are getting there, inching closer and closer to actually being relevant in all of the NFL. But honestly, they still don't have enough. I mean, you've seen it when Taylor Decker went down. You sat there and you started spinning your wheels trying to find offensive linemen to plug in. They just don't have the depth. All these teams in the Detroit area need to be rebuilding on some level at some point here because it's just brutal. The Red Wings and the Pistons, they need to sit there and blow it up, and they need to sit there and start from the ground level and just redo everything because it's not good. It's not good. The Tigers are the same way. Blow it up and rebuild everything because you don't have a minor league system. Your actual ball club is sitting there hemorrhaging money, and you're going to end up losing a really valuable player like a JD Martinez because you've got inflated contracts everywhere. So you got to sit there, and at some point you got to say enough's enough, and you just got to sit there, hit the self-destruct button, blow it all up, and just start all over. That's where we're at. As Detroit fans, it's absolutely brutal. Your sports watching enjoyment has now come to an end on June 22nd.
This is bad.
That's right, Adam. It sucks.
This is bad in regards to the Detroit Tigers. But in the NBA, hope springs eternal. And today, as this podcast drops, the NBA draft is going to occur. So we reached out to Wired podcast host Jake Chapman, Pistons.com. He'll be on the line kind of giving us a preview regarding the NBA draft and some of the news and notes that have occurred this week. Because, my goodness, once the NBA Finals ended, it is starting to seem like some of the movers and shakers are starting to come about, and some of the trades that have gone down have been very interesting. Lots of interesting storylines ahead, and we definitely want to check in with Jake Chapman right after this timeout. Doc here for Podomatic.com, our host site. When Adam and I first started this project, we were looking for a place to host our podcast, and the first place that we found was Podomatic.com, and we were lucky and blessed to be able to upload all of our recorded audio to one place. We've only used one host site, and that's Podomatic.com. Why haven't we used other sites or other places? Well, the reason why we stay with them and the reason why we've uploaded 600 to 700 podcasts to their platform is that it's very easy. Even a guy like Adam can take his brand new podcast, upload it to Podomatic within 2 or 3 minutes.
And I'm a total dunce.
It's just that easy. You take your recorded audio, you upload it to Podomatic, and within 5 minutes, which is about the time it takes to publish recorded audio, boom, you can share a link with all your friends, and they can share laughs, and they can share entertaining quality podcasts. So if you're going to start a brand new podcast, a brand new project like Adam is, there's only one host site that I'd recommend, and that's Podomatic.com.
On the phone with us right now is Piston Insider Jake Chapman, you can follow him at Jake Chapman NBA. You can also check out some of his great work on Wired, the Wired podcast for the Pistons, as well as Pistons.com. Jake, in the recent weeks, there's been some big news surrounding the Pistons as well as their move into downtown Detroit. So just want to get your take on what's going on with some of these injunctions and the filings that may prevent the Pistons from moving downtown. And do you see this causing any future problems?
It's kind of a hot button topic, whether or not that $35 million should have come out of Mr. Gore's pocket. Or if the taxpayers in the DDA were going to be on the hook for it. It does come from the tourism tax, so I think Detroiters can be a little bit more comfortable with the fact that it's not coming directly from their pocket. It's coming from visitors and people visiting hotels and staying downtown. But it seems like that cleared the runway for the move to happen, and I don't think there would be any issues. It would take something catastrophic at this point for the Pistons not to be playing basketball in the fall down at LCA.
Well, that sounds like a great thing, so that way no holdups with Detroit, can move into downtown. Headed into next season, what do you see as the biggest need for these Detroit Pistons?
Shooting. Look, I think there were steps in terms of internal development that didn't happen last year that needed to. Andre Drummond has to be better. He has to be closer to a franchise player. Stanley Johnson has to take the next step. I think obviously Reggie Jackson's health sort of, cast a pall on the entire season. They geared that offense around Reggie Jackson's pick and roll ability with Andre Drummond, and it wasn't right all year. So with the guys here, I think you can see them making steps. Obviously, you're expecting, now that Aaron Baines has opted out, a bigger role for Boban Marjanovic. You saw at the end of the year, Boban looked like certainly he could hold his own as the backup center. You saw some from Henry Ellenson. I think he'll be a part of the rotation this year as well. So you would expect the guys here to be better. It is still a young roster. And again, it felt like a few of those guys took steps backwards last season. But aside from that, look, you have one draft pick and you probably won't be a very major player in free agency just because you don't have a ton of money to be thrown around. And, short of making a major move and shaking up the roster, you're running it back with these guys. So you do need these guys all to take steps forward like you expected them to do last year. And then with that pick at 12, maybe you move that pick. I think there's been a lot of rumors about potentially bringing in a veteran. It's not the NFL. It's hard to move an NBA draft pick, although we just saw, obviously Boston and Philly making a blockbuster deal the other day. I would expect the Pistons to stay there at 12 and try to take a guy who either brings them shooting at the backup two-guard spot, and that would be probably Luke Kennard or Donovan Mitchell, or if Zach Collins is there, the kid out of Gonzaga, he would be the third center next year, but he's more of a project. It's going to take him 3 or 4 years. So I wouldn't expect them to get a guy who's immediately, and I actually asked Stan Van Gundy about this yesterday, I wouldn't expect them to get a guy who's immediately going to be able to contribute a lot, but I wouldn't be shocked if you get a guy there at 12 who's part of the rotation next season. Probably not a starter caliber type guy, but somebody who you work into your top 9 guys.
And Jake, let's not also forget about last year's draft pick, Henry Ellenson. He's probably looking to make a move this year to be more of a contributor for the Pistons. What do you see in terms of his development trying to get up to the Pistons this year in year 2?
Yeah, I mean, I think you saw at the end of the year, like, he can score the ball. He's a good shooter. He's got the ability offensively to put the ball on the floor and attack the basket. Obviously, last year was sort of a redshirt year. They sent him down to Grand Rapids a lot to get his minutes up. Didn't really have room for him just in terms of the backup power forward spot because they're trying to figure out where, with all the wings they have, Marcus Morris, Tobias Harris, Stanley Johnson, where do those guys carve their minutes out? You only have so many minutes at the small forward spot. So you had Tobias Harris and John Lohr playing a majority of the minutes last season at the 4. Tobias is, as we know, a combo guy. He can play the 3 or the 4. And John Lohr was really good for about 35, 40 games, and he fell off the second half of last season. So with Ellenson specifically, I think you see him maybe carving in to Lohr's minutes this year. Maybe you see a role with that second unit, depending on what Stan wants to do with Tobias Harris, where you have Harris playing minutes at the 3 alongside Ellenson. The real step for Ellenson is going to be the same thing kind of with Boban. They have a whole lot of potential offensively. They can put the ball in the basket, but what do they do on the defensive end? With Ellenson, it was about lateral movement, being able to guard pick and rolls, being able to get out on shooters when you're guarding a stretch 4 like we see all over the league right now. And then that body. He's got to bulk up a little bit and be able to go in amongst the trees, grab those rebounds, which at the NBA level is really difficult. And, as a power forward, you got to be able to get, up around 6-7 rebounds a game, depending on how many minutes you have. I think you will see a bigger role for Henry Ellenson. Stan Stan went out of his way to talk about how much he liked Ellenson last year, and it wasn't just because he was getting peppered with questions about why isn't your 18th pick playing. It was, because he really, I think, sees a lot of potential, specifically offensively with Ellenson. So I would expect him to have a bigger role this year.
What about a guy like Stanley Johnson? Last year was really disappointing. It seemed like at certain points him and Stan didn't see eye to eye, and he got himself in a little bit of hot water, was sent down to the D-League, was brought back up. Do you see Stanley Johnson either maturing and taking that next step, or is this just kind of what it is with Stanley Johnson?
No, I think there's still certainly a whole lot of room to grow with him. I do think, Stanley's a really smart kid, and sometimes when you're young and smart and sort of precocious, that can work against you because you might feel like you have everything sort of figured out. And I think that might have been an issue with him. Really what Stan talked about a lot last year was Stanley's a really hard worker. He's a really competitive guy. You put him on the floor during a game and you're going to get 100%. But from day to day, when he's doing his workouts and when he's in the gym trying to get better, is he doing it right? Is he listening? Is he taking coaching? Is he taking advice? And is he putting in the right amount of work? The right amount, I shouldn't say it like that. The right amount of work, yes, he was doing that, but is it the right work to be doing? So I think breaking those habits is a big step for him. He was overweight, quite frankly, at the beginning of last year. We know this guy's built like a linebacker, and his body and his athleticism is going to be, sort of the basis of his NBA career. Now it's just a matter of harnessing all that. And yeah, it was a step back last year, but certainly still a whole lot of potential with him. And I would, I'd be shocked if the Pistons were in a situation right now where they were sort of selling short on his future. I think they still have big plans for Stanley.
Look at you, Mr. Vocabulary, precocious. What's up with that? That's awesome. Great word.
When I was a kid, when I was 7, I used to use a whole lot of big words, and that's essentially what a precocious kid does, is talk like he's smarter than he actually is.
Now, when Stan Van Gundy's come out and tried to talk about the last season, he obviously had to address issues with Andre Drummond, and when you look at it, you realize that based upon the contract that he signed, the performance definitely needed to improve. But, how should fans view Andre Drummond's progression? Because should they continue to be patient and wait for his evolution? Or, how do you view those that say, well, look, you got a max player who sometimes has to be taken out because other teams are going to foul him to try to get back into the game? How do you view an Andre Drummond at this point in time?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult with him. Obviously, a lot of Piston fans have some big issues with the fact that it's almost night to night. Some nights it looks like he's one of the best bigs in the game, and sometimes it looks like he's just not into it. I'm not sure that's totally fair. Like, he shows up. I mean, Andre Drummond, his baseline is the best rebounder in the league, right? So when you pay him that much money, yes, you expect him to be more than just the best rebounder in the league. You need him to be a better defensive player specifically, and I think to be a little bit more efficient offensively. He doesn't need to be a huge part of the offense, and obviously he wants to be. All big men want the ball, and they want to be able to bully guys down in the post, and he worked on that hook shot. It wasn't very efficient last year. The free throws looked better for about a month or two. They came back down to earth. So you could call it a year of development. I think after, 5 seasons, Piston fans are kind of sick of developing, but you got to understand, with big men who are 24 years old, you should expect him to get better every year for like the next 6 years, maybe the next 8 years. So I think Piston fans are right to expect more out of him. But the guy isn't garbage either. I mean, he's one of the best young big men in the league, and I think you saw some things last year that, might not necessarily jump off the page at you, like the work in the post, like some of his defensive development. I think you saw him getting slowly a little bit better at sort of the mental approach of defending. He's never going to be DeAndre Jordan or Dikembe Mutombo and, a great shot blocker, but he can certainly be better in that department. And you see it, he's maturing. It's just not fast enough. Right? When I got here 3 seasons ago, Andre would have 2 dumb fouls early in a majority of the games. He doesn't do that anymore. He wouldn't get back on defense a lot. He doesn't do that as much anymore. I think he was in much worse shape 3 years ago than he is now. So he's getting there. It just might not be as fast as Piston fans want to see. And frankly, as fast as Piston fans should expect when you consider the amount of money he's been given. It's a really big offseason for Andre. And if next year goes the way this year did, then I could honestly see Stan, cutting the cord. And look, we heard at the trade deadline that basically the entire roster was open for discussion. I wouldn't be shocked if that's still the case. I think it would be sort of mind-blowing if Andre Drummond didn't start next season in a Pistons uniform. But, hey, man, it's the NBA in the offseason. We've seen just the last 72 hours or so how crazy it's been, so nothing will surprise me.
Jake Chapman, Pistons.com, host of the Wired podcast, which you can find and download on SoundCloud. While we have you here, I'm definitely curious to get your thoughts on some of the hot button topics also across the NBA. So to start with, this past NBA Finals, everybody had a comment. What was your take? Should LeBron have passed the ball in that pivotal game, in the NBA Finals?
Yeah, I think he made the right play. And, LeBron's been avoiding this his entire career. He's not Jordan. He's not Kobe. I remember going all the way back to when he was trying to get over the hump in Cleveland the first time with Zydrunas Ilgauskas and David Jones. And they had a couple series with the Washington Wizards back when the Wizards had Caron Butler and Anton Jamison and Gilbert Arenas. And I remember LeBron facing these same questions. He's driving to the basket. It's the end of the game. They're down by one, and he kicks out to Damon Jones. And luckily, Damon Jones hits the three in that situation. LeBron is a basketball savant. He almost always makes the right play. And, yeah, Draymond had 5 fouls in that situation. Attacking the basket might have gotten him to the free throw line. I think that's also been an issue. LeBron sometimes at the end of games does not want to drive the basket because he doesn't want to shoot free throws because he's not the best free throw shooter in the world, especially for a great player. But I'm never going to beat up LeBron too much. I did think in the second half of Game 5, defensively, he kind of gave up. I mean, he put all of his effort into the offensive end as his season was coming to an end. And I had a little bit of an issue with that. I think he sort of said, look, you guys got to help me out a little bit. I'm getting killed here. That's LeBron. He's a really good front runner. He's one of the greatest players we've ever seen. But in terms of, coming off that ball at the end of game, what was that? Was that Game 3? I think I think he made the right play. And so I'm not going to beat him up for that.
Okay, now that the season's ended, are you on Team LeBron or Team Dan Gilbert? Because now that the season's over, you're starting to see that potentially there might be, some wrinkles going on with the entire organization, which might lead to LeBron not being there after this upcoming season.
Yeah, I don't think I'll ever be on Team Dan Gilbert unless we're talking about, real estate in downtown Detroit.
Unless it's the Q line.
Look, this is him. He's a meddling owner. And I think back to Mark Cuban when he first took over the Mavericks. It took Cuban a long time to get it right. He was forever, meddling too much and making moves with his GMs and his head coaches and all this stuff. And it took finally, him settling down, I think, giving the job to a Rick Carlisle, a guy, and Donnie Nelson with the basketball operations staff, who he completely trusted, who had proven themselves to him, and who could sort of speak up to him. And in 12 and a half years, Dan Gilbert's been the owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers. He's never extended one of the general managers who he's had under contract. He's never brought a guy back. So it's obvious he still hasn't gotten over that. I do think part of this is, him sort of taking the team back. He said, I think David Griffin was like, look, there's no way I'm trading Kyrie. There's no way I'm making a drastic move with the exception of trading Kevin Love and bringing in another superstar. I'm not going to plan for 3 or 4 years down the road when LeBron James might not be here. I'm trying to go out and win it next season while LeBron James is here. And I think Dan Gilbert wants all of his contingency plans in place. I think he's reading the tea leaves. Everybody thinks LeBron's going to leave after next season. And, for Dan Gilbert, he's going to own the team long after next season. So he wants to make sure he's got his guys in there and he has his say over the basketball operation. I don't think it's smart. I think he fired a really good general manager. And look, I mean, the best way to put it is the only thing you can't do is piss LeBron off, and you pissed LeBron off. So obviously he's getting killed right now for it. But look, if you make billions of dollars and you buy a team, it's your prerogative. So God bless him.
I want to propose a hypothetical to you. So could there possibly be a trade with Cleveland for a guy like Kevin Love, who tends to maybe disappear in the playoffs and oftentimes seems to be on the outs with Kyrie Irving and LeBron James? Could they maybe work out a sign and trade with KCP, also including the 12th overall pick? If KCP goes over to Cleveland, that could possibly help out their defense. They were ranked, I believe, 22nd in the league in defensive efficiency, which is really low. That would also sit there and possibly help bolster them up a little bit to where they can maybe make another run for a championship. Detroit then gets their star that they wanted in a guy like Kevin Love. He's not a superstar, but he is a star, and that also helps stretch the floor a little bit, helps out with Andre Drummond, and possibly helps out with Reggie Jackson. Do you see something like that possibly happening either tonight or maybe in the future, working its way down here?
Yeah, we've actually talked about that. Me and some of the other beat writers for the Pistons. I've gotten a lot of mixed reactions. The one thing that you have to remember within all of that as well is that KCP is on LeBron's label, is on LeBron's agency, Clutch Sports. Maverick Carter, the agent, and Rich Paul, KCP is part of that. And we saw, Tristan Thompson's part of that. And that's why Tristan Thompson got that fat contract. Eric Bledsoe as well. And all those guys who are on Clutch Sports seem to want to figure out a way to play with LeBron James because we know the power that LeBron wields. So there is something to that. And I also think KCP, we've seen at least in small sample sizes, is a pretty good guy against that Golden State backcourt. He's one of the only guys who could pick up Steph, who could chase Klay Thompson through threes, through screens. And, when you have him on the floor, you don't have to hide him. He's a guy who can switch screens against the backcourt like the Golden State Warriors. All that said, I know for a fact that Stan Van Gundy loves KCP. I'd be blown away if KCP wasn't a Piston beginning next season, just because he's one of the only guys Stan can count on both sides of the floor. And, when you really think about it, and I do like Kevin Love, and I think a guy like Kevin Love would be a perfect fit with the roster the Pistons have now. But if you have to give up important pieces of what you have now, which already is at best about a 500 team, maybe a couple games above 500, then what do you really have? If you're going out there with Reggie Jackson, whoever your starting, two guard would be, maybe you slide Stanley Johnson down or whatever. You go out in free agency and you try to grab somebody. You got Marcus Morris, you got Tobias Harris, you got Kevin Love, you have Andre Drummond. I think it's a better team. I'm still not sure it's remotely close to a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference. I think giving up your best perimeter defender to bring in a really good scorer and a really good shooter, it solves one need, but it creates another problem. Now you have very, very subpar perimeter defense. And you got to remember, Marcus Morris, he's got 2 years left on that deal, but he's going to get a big payday coming up in 2019. So I think you have to start to think about perimeter defense. You got 2 guys you can really count on in terms of Pope and Morris. Long term, if you get rid of KCP, you're really sort of starting from scratch in terms of the defensive end. In terms of guarding, ball handlers and things like that. So I'd be real surprised if that would happen. And it also sounds like, the Cavaliers are shooting for a bigger fish than KCP with Kevin Love. They got their sights set on Paul George or Jimmy Butler or somebody of that ilk.
All right, Jake, we'll get you out of here on this. With the draft upon us here, what are some names that Detroit Piston fans should keep their eye out on that Detroit Pistons could select 12th overall? I know you mentioned Luke Kennard earlier in this segment. Who else should they keep an eye out on?
Yeah, I think Donovan Mitchell, the other 2 guard, kid out of Louisville. We met him on Father's Day. He was in for their private workout. He was very, very impressive. He's certainly a guy you can check the box about maturity, about putting the work in, and about athleticism. He was pretty much the most impressive athlete at the combine. So Donovan Mitchell, the 2 guard out of Louisville, I think is a real possibility there. I also think if Zach Collins, the big from Gonzaga, slips, you might see him. And then I asked Stan yesterday, I mentioned this before, about whether or not he, when you have needs like shooting, but you kind of expect whoever it is you're going to draft not to contribute for 2 to 3 years, what do you do there? And he was like, well, we have guys in the tier that we're looking at there at 12 who both we see as a 2 to 3 year project. And we also have guys who we see as being able to come in and contribute right away. That made me think of Justin Jackson, the kid from North Carolina. He's a junior, obviously won a championship last year, made over 100 threes. And, he's a guy I think is a little bit more polished. You give up some of that upside, but you bring in shooting and a guy you're pretty confident can play right away. So I think Justin Jackson might be in the mix there at 12 as well.
Outstanding. Jake, thanks for your time. Keep up the good work with Pistons.com as well as your podcast, Wired. We appreciate it.
All right, guys. Be well.
That was a good chat with Jake Chapman. My goodness, he's definitely connected. Definitely check out his podcast, The Wired Podcast. You can find it on SoundCloud and follow him on Twitter at Jake Chapman. NBA, always a good dude, lots of NBA knowledge. And it was very interesting to kind of get his sense, too, because the reason why I asked him about the Cleveland stuff is he's a Cleveland guy, so he's well connected.
I know why you asked him. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. He is like a basketball sponge. You just want to squeeze it to get some of that knowledge out. So absolutely, he's always a good time, always takes a lot of time out of his day to sit there and come and rap with us and just kind of kick it with us. So much appreciated.
Our final timeout, we'll come back. Second half of the podcast, we got to talk about the Red Wings. We'll see regarding, Petr Mrazek, the whole protection list and things like that. Get into our thoughts about Ken Holland and the future of the Red Wings. And to finish the podcast, the Doc and Jock Pro Wrestling Report after this final timeout. I want to tell you about FanaticU.com, Detroit Sports official outfitter and the official outfitter of the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. If you're looking for some sweet sports swag and you want to represent the Pistons, Wings, Lions, Tigers, Michigan, or Michigan State, you got to check out Fanatic U. Great online shop dedicated to Detroit sports. If you're looking for memorabilia, you're looking for sweet swag, definitely check out FanaticU.com. Or if you're in the Metro Detroit area, 6 locations all over. You can definitely stop in there and check out the sweet items that they have at Fanatic U. They've been a longtime supporter of ours, and we definitely support those who support us. FanaticU.com. I was just thinking, too, when we were talking about doing the podcast and the successes that we've been having, you and I now, after doing 201 podcasts, we send each other a list, and when we send the list to each other, we're off just on the segment placing. That's it. You know what I mean? When I sent you what I wanted to talk about, you had the same thing kind of situated, but just in different spots. So That was pretty cool.
It's like we're great minds think alike and stuff like that.
Simpatico, baby. Now, I'm kind of curious to see if we're simpatico with our thoughts regarding the Red Wings, because not too many times, when news is broken that you get this fury of tweets to our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. But, man, last week when Kenny Holland and when it was released who was protected, everybody kind of had a notion already that maybe Kenny Holland released some of the names already to some of the beat writers, but many people dissected it, and many people were really focused on the goaltender situation in the fact that the Red Wings decided to protect Jimmy Howard and leave Petr Mrazek exposed. But there were several other moves that could have been made as well that kind of upset a lot of people, because many people also kind of pinpointed that most people would not have taken Justin Abdelkader because of the length of his contract. So you could have left him on the exposed list and kept others as well. But many people have dissected it. Many people are upset. And I really haven't thought, maybe at this point in time, I really didn't think that Kenny Holland could have a point where a lot of people are upset with him. But I think right now, as we're recording this podcast, a lot of fans in Metro Detroit are not happy with Ken Holland. And I'm curious to get your reaction, because for me, I kind of looked at it and I said, I do feel like Ken Holland did at least a little bit of research and kind of maybe scoured the landscape and felt like, hey, what could I get for Petr Mrazek? But word is kind of getting around regarding the fact that Petr Mrazek just didn't have a good season last year. And many people are also looking to his last performances in the championships. And he was getting benched. He didn't play well for his country. And it was kind of interesting, too. I don't know if you saw his Instagram post where he was working out. There is kind of rumors swirling, and many people are wondering, is this a hit job, or is this really the notion that people are thinking about Petr Mrazek, is that he's not a hard worker? And so, Petr Mrazek, the way you look at it is, it kind of looks like the Wings want him to be taken, because they're fully comfortable going with Jimmy Howard and Jared Careau for the upcoming season, which might be a lean year. But I look at it and I say, wow, if he's not taken, okay, let's say the draft comes and he's not taken, then you got a guy who's probably going to be upset a little bit regarding the notion that he now knows where he stands with the organization. And when he becomes a free agent, he likely may become upset and he might take his talents elsewhere. So it'll be very fascinating to see, how this all shakes out with Petr Mrazek. But for me, I kind of go, man, when he first came into the league, we were super high on him. We wanted him to replace Jimmy Howard. And to say the least, his performance last year just wasn't good enough, and he's got to get better. Would I have protected him? I probably would have. I would have protected Mrazek and let Howard be on the list because of the fact that I know the money situation, but hey, you decided to pay 2 goaltenders upwards of $9 million in a salary cap era. I would like to go into the next season with Mrazek and Howard and let them continue to battle it out. It seems like a good tandem, but it just seems like a lot of people are pissed off. Where do you stand?
Well, I thought it was interesting when the list finally came out of who Ken Holland decided to protect, because I looked at this as a reset button. You could sit there and you could reset your franchise, help move some money around to get underneath the salary cap minimum, and to sit there and be able to clear some players out that you had signed to some long-term bad contracts, or at least make them available to where they could be alleviated from your books. When I sat there and I looked at this list, the one big issue I had was Henrik Zetterberg, and I understand that his salary cap hit isn't that much going forward, but he's still a high salary guy. Same thing with Abdicator. I thought he was another guy that you could sat there, you could make available, and you could protect some younger talent and protect some younger players. The Dan DeKeyser, keeping him, I didn't necessarily mind. Mike Green, I didn't necessarily mind. I like keeping Nick Jensen. I thought that was a smart move there, as well as Athanasiou and Anthony Mantha. Franz Nielsen, you had to keep. Gustav Nyquist and Thomas Tatar, I was kind of on the fence. It could have went either way. I didn't necessarily mind. I don't think there was enough players on this team where I was like, you got to keep this guy. If you don't keep this guy, then, oh man, Ken Holland's a total boob. I didn't feel like that. I didn't think that was a huge issue. Keeping Jimmy Howard over Petr Mrazek, I get it. I understand it. If you look at how they played last year, if Jimmy Howard didn't get hurt, and that's always the thing, if Jimmy Howard didn't get hurt, he's always hurt. He's got a groin injury, and it's going to linger until the end of his career. But Jimmy Howard outplayed Petr Mrazek. Petr Mrazek could never get on a roll last season. He played awful. It was probably his worst career season that he's had in the NHL. And it appears that the book is out on Petr Mrazek. It seems as though he has a bad attitude. He feels entitled. He feels like he should be given the number one goaltending job. And yes, he has made some spectacular saves, and at times he has looked like a stud goaltender, somebody who might be able to win a Vezina, but it's too inconsistent. He's really hot for 5-6 games, then he cools off for 3, and he has absolutely atrocious games. And then he'll get hot for maybe a 10-game stretch, and then he cools off for 5. So it's just his play is too inconsistent. It's never leveled out. That being said, last season, Jimmy Howard was a stud. And yeah, I don't like playing in excess of $9 million to goaltenders, and actually 2 goaltenders that I'm not in love with by far. But if you had to pick one, gun to your head, I'm probably going to take Jimmy Howard over Petr Mrazek just because Mrazek was so inconsistent last year, and he's been inconsistent ever since he's come up to the NHL. Jimmy Howard has played a little bit more consistent, a little bit more even-handed, and you just have to kind of sit there and deal with his injuries. You know, like he's got a groin injury. I don't think it's ever going to repair itself. I don't think it's ever going to get fixed, not until the day he retires. And that's just something you've got to sit there and you got to go along with.
So when the names are called, Wednesday evening during the NHL expansion draft, do you see the Knights taking Petr Mrazek and flipping him? Because that's the notion that is pissing people off, is that, okay, can the Knights take advantage and flip Petr Mrazek when the Wings could not?
I don't think that wouldn't piss me off, because you now just sat there and you just moved $4 million in cap space. So look on the bright side. Do I think that you flipping him for something else? I think what you need to worry about is possibly a guy like Riley Sheahan getting moved, because going into last year's trade deadline, the conversation was you might be able to get a second-round pick out of that guy, and Ken Holland never pulled the trigger on it. This is a guy who didn't score a goal in 81 games and then decided to pump 2 in the net in game 82. Do you know what I'm saying? So why not move that guy who underperformed the entire season and get something for him, and then you wouldn't have to worry about making him available now. You would actually have had that second-round draft pick, if that's what you could have got for him, in your back pocket. So that's what I would be more upset about, is as a guy like a Riley Sheahan going, when you could have got a second-round draft pick for him last season at the trade deadline. Look, Petr Mrazek goes, that's fine. That's fine. You sat there, you possibly lost a player who has a bad attitude, and you sat there, you lost a guy who is up and down like a roller coaster. You lost a guy who, has the potential to make spectacular saves, but he also has the potential to sit there and give up 5 goals a game.
So it's a little bit foul to kind of be critiquing Kenny Holland this heavily regarding leaving Petr Mrazek unprotected. It's a little bit foul, a little bit too much.
I think everybody's getting upset about the wrong thing. I think you're totally fair to sit there and critique and criticize Ken Holland, because I think he's made really bad moves. And I think looking at his list, there were some moves there that were head-scratching. Like you said, Justin Abdicator, Henrik Zetterberg, it's a guy who's now approaching 40. Is this the guy who you want to sit there and tie your organization to? Yeah, I know he sat there and he put in quite a few points for you last season, but again, you could sit there and you can go back and you can look at other guys who play on bad teams. Somebody on bad teams has to score goals. You know what I'm saying? So I think that this was the ability to hit the reset button on your franchise, to sit there and move some contracts, possibly set yourself up for the future and get this rebuild underway here. And instead, Ken Holland is basically playing to try to make the playoffs again. You know, it's almost like he's trying to keep the streak alive. And this is a time where you could have really have sat back, done some due diligence, moved some guys around, protected some younger cats, and sat there and just let a lot of your more expensive guys, the older guard, just let them go, let them be out there. And if they get picked, they get picked. If they don't, they don't. And you could just kind of move on from there.
And I feel like Kenny Holland probably did his due diligence and realized, okay, the Knights are going to take Marc-Andre Fleury. There's a lot of goalies that can be selected.
There's a lot of good goalies
There's a lot of good goalies that
Petr Mrazek's probably the 5th or 6th one.
Exactly. They can take 7, but, you know, the idea would be I don't think that if Petr Mrazek is chosen that he's going to be on the roster, because then you're going to have a similar situation where you're going to be paying 2 goalies a lot of money. So it's just an interesting situation. And then to end this part about talking about the Wings is that an interesting debate I kind of heard and people are getting into is that the Knights have a really good opportunity to kind of, if they pick right, either draft a lot of players and flip them for more picks, or they have an opportunity to select some good players to start out their season, to start out their inaugural season with some success. So right now, would you rather be a fan of the Knights or the Red Wings? Which future is brighter? Which team probably has a chance to advance to the second round of the postseason sooner?
I'm glad you asked this question, because I think the NHL made this super, super simple for the Las Vegas Knights. It seems like they've got everything going their way. They're allowed to sit there and call teams and be like, well, we're thinking about taking this player unless you trade us something. Okay, so give us a first-round pick and give us a second-round pick. This team might have the possibility to have 5 first-round picks going into this draft. That's unbelievable and insane. If I had to sit there and choose whose future is brighter right now, a team that has essentially nobody on their roster and your Detroit Red Wings, I'm going to go with the Las Vegas Knights, because they've got basically the world by the ass at this point, because they could call any team and threaten to take any player, and they could demand your first, your second, and your third round pick, and that team's going to give them to you if they value whatever player they left unprotected. It's amazing how the NHL set this up for this team to become so successful so quickly. I wouldn't be surprised if the Las Vegas Knights were playing for a Stanley Cup championship in the next 4 to 5 years. I'm gonna put it out there right now. Next 4 to 5 years, watch out. Las Vegas will be challenging for a Stanley Cup, while your Red Wings will still be trying to figure it out.
Yeah, we hope that the Wings are soon going to actually rebuild, because, you know, we had an interesting chat with Craig Custance, former ESPN NHL writer, now the proprietor of theathletic.com, and he kind of said the same thing, in that would the fans accept a rebuild, you know, based upon the legacy that Steve Yzerman, Nick Lidstrom built. And he kind of said that maybe the fans of Detroit would not accept that, and it would kind of tear it down. But, you know, the interesting debate with that is, if the Wings rebuilt and he came out and the organization said, look, we are going to have lean years, yes, but the notion is, the goal is to have a couple lean years, restock our talent in the efforts that we pick the right guys, and we hope you trust us so that we get back to the level of winning the Stanley Cup. You have to let the fans know where you're thinking, and it's just really tough, because if they continue to kind of be in this purgatory and not commit to a rebuild, I don't think the faith is there in a lot of fans. You've lost to some who really don't believe that you're on the track of winning the Stanley Cup. They believe that you're just on the path of being mediocre. And this is hockey town. This is winning town. And if you're going to be in that kind of realm where you're not going to be forthright and honest and tell us that, hey, you're in purgatory, and you're going to think that you're going to fill up that stadium, get out of here, man. You got to have some stars, and you got to have some talent. And in a salary cap era, you got to do things a lot better.
I agree with you 100%.
It's got to be a lot better, and so we'll see what happens.
You know what? I wouldn't be surprised if Ken Holland gets through this year and then he's let go as well. He hasn't done enough in the last couple seasons to sit there and make me feel confident in his ability to be able to put a team together and to be able to sit there and make this a winning organization again.
And sometimes it's true. You know, you hear the word roster fatigue. Sometimes there's management fatigue. The guy's been there forever.
That's true.
And he's making some moves that people are questioning. And so sometimes just making a move to get a quality guy in there that's going to reset and maybe commit to youth and commit to the right youth is not going to be a bad thing. You don't erase the legacy of Ken Holland, but I'm not totally opposed to replacing him as well. All right, sir, let's segue into the Doc and Jock Pro Wrestling Report. And this week, my goodness, we're going to let it rip, because I did get a chance on Father's Day after the daily activities to sit down and watch Money in the Bank. And I said to myself, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to be fair and really watch a pay-per-view. And right away, they kicked it off with probably the biggest disappointment, probably in 2017. You had 5 quality women go in there and try and wrestle for the Money in the Bank match, and you let it go 14 minutes, and you have it end where a man climbs up and helps another woman, in essence, you flush the women's revolution down the toilet right there by kind of putting the notion out that a man has to go help a woman. Now, they corrected it on SmackDown, but for those that don't know, at the Money in the Bank pay-per-view match, Carmella wins it. But you could have let that match go on at a later time and to only give them 14 minutes. It was so frenetic. There were some great spots that were like awesome when Tamina knocked off Carmella and Charlotte. You had Charlotte doing a great bump from the top rope. It was a good match, but to give them only 14 minutes kicked off the pay-per-view terribly, and it went downhill from there where it seems like, okay, they set the card right. The writers and the staff, they set the card right, but they don't set the lineup correctly, and they don't know how to end finishes correctly. You have a count-out in the tag team championship match? Come on now. You got people who are paying good money. You got fans watching. We're tired of seeing fluky count-outs. You're tired of seeing these swerves in terms of endings. Just have whoever's going to be put over, have solid endings. That will do you much further than all these fluky endings. And you have this title match, Lana versus Naomi, and I was like, wow, Lana's slow. Naomi did a good job to try to carry her, but Lana's she's not a world championship match caliber wrestler, and you can't put it there. So overall,
the first match though, she gets a shot at the belt.
She's slow. It's like methodical, and it's like Naomi had to bust her ass to make the match at least presentable. Fine. Now you go and you're telling yourself, man, this pay-per-view is garbage. But then you get into the Money in the Bank match, and you had guys just put their heart out into it. They realized what they were in, and and having talks with other wrestling fans, they totally disagreed with me. And I think they took your stance in saying that, guys like Sami Zayn or Baron Corbin need to win this match because the other guys are fine on their own. They can go forward and set up other feuds. And so you had it happen. You had Baron Corbin win the Money in the Bank pay-per-view match. When you look at it after the fact, very smart move. I think that's the way you continue to elevate that guy, and the way they utilized him on SmackDown was perfect. So if you're going to watch Money in the Bank, the Doc's recommendation is just watch the final match. The rest is garbage. Jinder Mahal winning was cool, but it just didn't have that. It was basically traditional heel versus traditional babyface, and you had the match go down. But it just doesn't feel like, what it was? The pay-per-view kind of felt like a traditional edition of SmackDown. It didn't feel all that special. So overall, I would rate it as a 2-star pay-per-view. You can just watch the final match and get a lot out of it. So the pay-per-view was disappointing in my opinion.
And here's the thing. It seemed as though the pay-per-view set up this week's SmackDown.
Yeah.
It felt like everything built to this week's SmackDown, which is not how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to have SmackDown built to the pay-per-view.
And the payoff is... And the pay-per-view is then supposed to be the payoff.
Exactly. And I think the big issue with the women's Money in the Bank match, so James Ellsworth goes up, gets the briefcase, and throws it down to Carmella. She's excited. She won this, that, the other thing. That's fine. She comes out on Tuesday night, and she cuts a great promo.
Ooh, that was nice.
Basically saying, I don't care. I want it. It's mine. I'm now in the number one contender, and I've got my check to sit there and cash it in at any time I want. She got legitimate heel heat, and she sat there and she had Ellsworth bouncing around in the background. I really wanted her to sit there and turn on Ellsworth and basically say, I don't even need you anymore, and sit there and hit him with the briefcase and go off on her own. We didn't get that, but she sits there and she gets legit heel heat, and everybody's in the back complaining about it, and then you've got Daniel Bryan who comes out and strips her of it. So you had bad writing and you had bad booking on top of, for the pay-per-view. Now you go to Tuesday, she actually does a great promo, and she gets legit heat, and then you have more bad writing that now strips her of her heel heat.
It doesn't
It makes
sense.
no sense. It was just absolutely atrocious. It's like WWE had a plan, and then they changed course again in the middle of it.
Exactly. You don't need a segment where Daniel Bryan has all the women come out and talk. You just have them sit out there and go, you know what? I liked the match so much. It was a great women's match. Let's do it again. Just let her keep let her keep the Money in the Bank, and just say, look, okay, instead of you defending it against all these 5 women who want a piece of you, back up your mouth and let's do it again. That's all.
That's it.
You don't need it. You don't need to do. Sometimes keeping it simple is the right way to go. But you said it. I think the writing was pretty poor in terms of the women's Money in the Bank scenarios. It was pretty bad.
It's just like they're always sitting there going one direction, and then there's some fan outrage, so then they just change course.
Exactly.
It's poorly put together.
And the news of the week, they finally paid it off. We got to realize, again, though, many people will debate, was the Enzo and Cass segment with Kurt Angle really too long? But overall, though, I would say you know what? If you're going to launch a superstar and you're going to launch a heel, Cass doing it that way, it might have been a little bit long of a segment in terms of setting it up, but his promo was like, dude,
it was perfect.
Where's this guy coming from?
Didn't sound like a robot.
Nope.
There was some emotion.
It was perfectly done. Cass crying was a little bit soft in my opinion, but
no, it's great.
It does show the end of a friendship, but it's just weird the way they kind of introduced Enzo and Cass without ever giving them not even like a 3-day title run, and they broke them up. But, in the end, you got a big dude that's going to be potentially destroying Raw. And even if you just start with the matchup of Braun Strowman versus Cass, if you go down that program for SummerSlam, I'd pay to watch that.
Yeah, it should be good. Cass is going to get a huge rocket shoved up his butt here. He's going to get shot to the moon. Woo! I have no idea what they're going to do with Enzo now.
Right.
Maybe he goes to 205 Live. I'm not sure what's going to happen to Enzo. He's kind of in this tweener spot where you're not really sure. I feel like he'd be a great manager for somebody, though.
Yeah, quick, cheap heat. You just have him go over to SmackDown, and he have a quick feud with James Ellsworth, and he becomes the manager of Carmella.
That would be kind of cool. And do you know what the rub is there? That's Cass's girlfriend in real life. So that is
genius.
That's perfect.
That's good writing. That's what you do.
That would be great writing. You need to be on the staff.
See,
this is horrible.
Maybe they're going to do it, and they're just going to follow along because I think that's a good way to kind of kick them off.
Hey, WWE, steal our idea. It's okay. We don't mind.
It's okay.
Just give us a better freaking product.
Exactly. So,
but here's the thing. My wife, super distraught about this whole thing.
She liked Enzo and Cass?
Oh, she loved Enzo. When we went to Raw, I bought her a Certified G t-shirt, and that's like her favorite t-shirt. She wears it all the time. She loves Enzo and Cass. And like whenever they come out and they cut their promo, she does the whole thing. She knows it by heart. She loves it. She says we can't watch Raw anymore. She's devastated.
It's devastated. But it kind of sucks too because you're going to kick off Cass being a monster by destroying Enzo. So how do you promote Enzo, being a badass or a guy instead of he's just going to be a whipping boy?
Yeah.
Or maybe you don't have a match. You just say, you know what? Enzo, you're not in my class. I'm not even going to start to entertain the notion of having a fight with you. And you just have Cass whoop his ass every now and then.
Well, see, this is where...
Sometimes you don't have to have a feud to end up in a match.
That's true. But I feel like Enzo's got to get some type of retribution or he's got to be able to
it's not believable.
Himself.
How is he going to do that?
But this is what I'm talking about, though, right here, right? So he needs to go on and become a manager. So he needs to find somebody else to do his bidding, to be able to take on Cass, whether it be Braun Strowman, whether it be, I don't know, somebody else in the back. He's got to go find somebody to sit there and basically stick up for him, and he can be the mouthpiece.
Yeah, so if they do it right and they set it up, you could probably kick this off probably all the way to the Survivor Series or at least Royal Rumble and pay it off and keep having, a situation where it's a long-time feud where, Enzo is getting in the way of Cass trying to become a monster.
Yeah, something. There has to be something there. Something else I liked from Raw, I liked how Bayley came in when all the women were in the ring and she totally cleaned house. It looks as though they're giving her a little bit of an edge back because they've totally have just crapped the bed with this character and just tore her down and made her I don't even like watching her segments, but she comes in, she cleans house on all the heel women, throws them all out of the ring. It takes a whole team to take down Nia Jax, but whatever, I'm cool with it. I like if they're going to sit there and they're going to give her a little bit of an edge and they're going to have her kind of come out of this, like Mary Poppins type character and just kind of let her be a little bit more realistic. I like that if that's the direction they're heading. I think that's outstanding. I think that's awesome.
Now, obviously, I think we were all geeking out when Braun Strowman's, ambulance came out there.
When it was like beep, 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 you knew who it was.
That was pretty cool. I thought that, it was a good surprise. I think we kind of realized that his injury was not going to be a full 6 months. But to see him and to continue that matchup, are you excited at all for the ambulance match? Great Balls of Fire pay-per-view, Braun Strowman versus Roman Reigns continuing their feud?
I'm interested because I like Braun Strowman. I feel like his injury maybe sucked some of his momentum. Because I felt like every time he came on the screen, it was a big deal before he went away for a little bit. I'm not really intrigued by this pay-per-view at all, and I'm really not intrigued by this match. I think Braun's got to win it. I don't think Roman gets the win, right? I think Braun wins the ambulance match. I want to see Joe beat Brock, but I don't think that's happening either. So it just doesn't seem like a very interesting pay-per-view to me at this point.
Yeah, setting up slowly a little bit at this point in time.
I mean, we got 3 weeks still, so there's still some time, but at this moment in time, I'm really not interested. I mean, shoot, we just came off a pay-per-view from the other day, so I got another one I got to get ready for here. You know what I'm saying? It's just too much. Too much.
Exactly. Welcome to the fabulous era of Carmella. It was great. It was great promo week. And then on SmackDown, one of the things that was awesome was seeing Shinsuke actually put together a nice match, which you thought he would have had in his debut. But, when you work with a guy a little bit more, then you can continue to have good matches. And Shinsuke looked really strong on SmackDown. I liked the way they used AJ Styles. I liked the fact that they didn't, have him too much take damage or anything like that. Kevin Owens is just, when he's out there, he's really a guy that's probably, I would say, the most underrated guy. I would say
he's great.
I would say the U.S. Championship doesn't suit him. I think it's time for him to kind of go out there and elevate himself to championship caliber talent.
What about American Alpha actually showing up today? I mean, that was outstanding, right? I mean, shoot, I thought they were dead and buried. I had no idea where they even were. They were on the back of milk cartons, for God's sakes here.
Yeah, I'm like, dude, what are you going to do? Elevate the Hype Brothers right away when he comes back? I'm like, come on now.
Which they should. I love Zack Ryder.
You would? Yeah.
I think Zack Ryder's good. I think Mojo Riley's kind of a boner, but I love Zack Ryder. I think he's awesome. American Alpha, I think if they did a heel turn with them, I think that would be interesting. This is now creative booking for 2.
But again, Kevin Owens versus AJ Styles for the U.S. title seems like you could do it for the heavyweight title.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that is a heavyweight match all day long. Mm-hmm. Kevin Owens is great. He's dealing with a broken thumb right now, but he is outstanding, super underrated. The guy's losing weight. He's getting himself back into shape, and I think that's maybe a decree coming down from Vince because, Vince loves bodybuilders and likes his wrestlers to be basically chiseled. He's cutting the weight, and I think he's going to be shooting for a world championship title match here shortly on the horizon. I don't know if AJ is going to take the U.S. strap off of him or not, but don't be surprised if he drops that and then all of a sudden gets into the contention for the heavyweight belt.
Biggest disappointment of the week is the way Raw used Finn Balor. I mean, come on now. You don't got to give him a squash match. Come on.
Absolutely awful.
But they did pay it off with the entourage now has been established, and the Miz segment was pretty cool. And like you said, and like I said last week, it was a cool segment. It was seen, last week's Bear segment on Raw was seen over 1 million times on YouTube. Mm-hmm. So it's been popular. It's been a hit. So for those that don't know now, the Bums, the Scrubs, Curtis Axel, and Bo Dallas are now part of the entourage for The Miz. And I'm like, perfect. Those are the guys. If you're not going to use Bo Dallas with his brother Bray Wyatt, and you're not going to introduce that at any time soon, then it's perfect to elevate them. And that promo that he used was, I was like, I was shocked that Miz would actually go there, but he's been doing it. So he said, look, you guys are disappointments to your families. Come on board with The Miz, and all will be good. And he's paying it off. And so even though the feud between Dean Ambrose and The Miz is not new, they're continuing to reinvent it and add new layers to it. So that's all you can ask for.
Yeah, and I liked Bo Dallas coming out against Finn Balor. He showed some aggression, a little bit of a new look with his beard.
Finn Balor's at the top of the card.
I agree. I don't feel like they're in the same realm, but I like what I've seen from Bo Dallas. Because, come on, Bo Dallas was always going, Bo, leave, with his big old sign. Then he'd get squashed, and then he'd cry his way to the back. So a new look for Bo Dallas. I like that. I do like Miz getting his own little entourage. I still find Maurice to be super hot. Can't really stand when she talks, though, but it's here nor there. What about Corey Graves on Raw getting
the scoop?
Yeah, it just seems like
weird.
He's the Oracle here, and he's getting a lot more FaceTime on television, like more than any announcer before.
Well, he was a former wrestler in NXT.
I get that, but
a talent.
But he is now an announcer, and yet he gets a ton of screen time. So I feel like there's something big coming for Corey Graves. I'm not sure what it's going to be yet, but there's something on the horizon for him. So just keep your eyes and your ears peeled to that.
Okay, that was DocNJock Pro Wrestling Report. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how these storylines evolve, but you have probably a couple talents that are being underutilized, but Samoa Joe is continuing to perform at a high level, and he's a guy that when he cuts promos seems natural. Even though it is scripted, he seems like he's delivering the lines on cue, on point. His matches are believable, and I like the way they wove into the fact that Joe won his first match versus Roman Reigns. I like the way they set up that angle and stuff like that, but again, you got Tozawa trying to link up with Titus O'Neil. That looks stupid. Mm-hmm. And it's just, like I said, I would cut out if you want to make Raw better, is you give more time to the talent and less time to the mid-card guys because you're not elevating them, so I would not give them that much time. Anytime Titus O'Neil's on there, I'm just flipping through. Anytime the cruiserweights are on there, I'm not really paying attention. So, and probably if we're going to title, and I guess I'll give them an award, the bum segment right now that I'm not really interested in because you probably already know what's going to happen is Seth Rollins versus Bray Wyatt. Not invested. It's not that great. you probably know that Seth Rollins is going to be put over, and again, you're going to squash Bray Wyatt. So when that segment comes on, it's just kind of the same thing. I'm going to say this, and Seth Rollins is going to respond. So for that angle being put together, they get an award. Yeah, I just don't see that angle paying off anywhere. I don't know if it elevates a guy, de-elevates a guy. So that angle I just don't really want to see, other than the fact maybe if you introduce something cool and new with Bray Wyatt, it's just an angle that they'll have it and they'll move forward.
Bray Wyatt's starting to get stale.
Yeah.
Like his whole concept, the whole eater of worlds, and I'm a god.
It's boring. It's boring. They got to reinvent themselves.
I have no idea where you're going with it.
And finally, too, if you want to give a 1B to a group that's stale, too, it's the New Day. You got to have them change because they're doing the same thing, walking to the ring, having their comments. It's been over a year now. You can't roll with the same sayings and the same tooting the horn, the same entrance for over a year. So they need a little bit of an infusion, too, to kind of mix it up a little bit because it's been over a year and I'm bored with them, too.
Yeah. I like the Usos. I like when the Usos come out. They cut some scathing promos. Them and their little bit of a... I don't know if it's more...
Badassness is... Yeah. The badassness is cool.
Kind of a gangster lean for them. I like it. I think it's fun. I still find the Fashion Files and the Fashion Police, I find them to be awesome at this point. I really do. I know you're sitting there squinching your face up and you're looking at me kind of disgusted. I find them to be entertaining as hell right now.
It's entertaining.
I think they're one of the better comedy skits on the show. And the crowd pops huge when they come out. And when they get wins, it's awesome. I think they're one of the tag teams that are somewhere in the middle. They're not upper class and they're not even like an upper mid class, but they're in the middle here, and they're so over though, like so over, just stuck in the middle and just super over. I find it to be kind of ironic and awesome all at the same time.
Episode 202 coming to a close. Great podcast, sir. Thank you for always making Wednesdays fun to record. It'll be interesting to see now how the NBA draft is going to take place tonight, what happened with the Knights and the expansion draft. It's going to be a fun week ahead. I'm looking forward to the upcoming episodes on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. For the Jock, Adam Strozinski, I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Download all the podcasts. You can listen 24/7 via all the platforms you can find podcasts. And to support us, go check around DetroitSportsPodcast.com.
Go check out the new one on Friday, and let's go Las Vegas Knights. Take everybody from Detroit.
This was locker room talk.
Second dick.
Sorry, Detroit. Didn't quite work out.
And all I can say is Detroit Sports Podcast scores.
I hear voices in my head. They counsel me. They understand. They talk to me.